I was really hoping to get a better understanding of the hype surrounding this product. And I think I finally get where this hype is coming from. And it's a bit weird. This is the ModRetro Chromatic. It's a Game Boy Color clone console that uses FPGA technology to mimic actual hardware. For the first time ever, see your classic games with a pixel-level accuracy on Chromatic's sunlight-readable display, is what it says on the box. That's the quote. For the first time ever, and pixel-level accuracy. This is not the first Game Boy Color clone console. This is not the first FPGA Game Boy Color clone. It's got a very nice screen. For the first time ever, and pixel-level accuracy is going to be a lot to unpack. And that's what everybody keeps parroting about this thing, and it might be the most controversial thing about this device. Not the fact that it was made by Palmer Luckey, former founder of Oculus, who was fired from Meta for being a Trump supporter and is now an arms dealer for the government, who makes drones with guns, drones with bombs, boats with guns, and surveillance towers. Yeah, he sells billions of dollars worth of weapons to the government, and also makes a Game Boy Color. We're going to focus on the merits of this thing as a retro handheld. The controversial thing here is how everybody is just eating up all this marketing jargon as if this is their first time seeing a retro handheld before. This isn't some revolutionary new device, it's just a Game Boy. The screen is beautiful though. 160 by 144 resolution LCD screen that was supposedly custom made just for this device. This video that you're watching is in 4K resolution, which is roughly 4,000 pixels across horizontally. This ModRetro Chromatic screen is 0.1K resolution. That is exactly the resolution of Game Boy and Game Boy Color games. They supposedly put a lot of R&D into making this screen as close to the real deal as possible, while still providing the modern convenience of actually being able to see what you're playing. I actually like this as a Game Boy clone. It is $200, which is a bit steep for a console that can only really play Game Boy Color games, but I guess they justify that price with all the effort they put into this screen, and also other bullet points like a sapphire crystal glass and magnesium alloy body. Never have I ever heard people get excited for sapphire glass until right now. It would seem as though people are really excited about these bullet points. Why? I'm still trying to figure out what exactly makes it so special. If you've been paying attention to emulation and the retro scene at all, there's not a lot that's new here, other than it's neat to have a new device to mess with. That's cool. I think I'm ornery because I've just been having a lot of people in my chat asking me when I'm gonna talk about this and parroting just all of the bullet points that don't seem to really be that big of a deal. Everyone over at r/ModRetro Chromatic is just splitting hairs. So we're gonna be splitting a lot of hairs in this video. And we're gonna try to get to the bottom of why anyone would wanna spend $200 on a Game Boy Color that only does Game Boy Color games. This video is sponsored by Rocket Money. Whoa, what's all this? What are you doing? I'm just trying to budget all my money. I do this every Tuesday. Why don't you just use Rocket Money for that? It does it all for you. Oh, I forgot. I got this new app. It's called AI Money Guy. What is it? Rocket Money is the personal finance app that helps you cancel subscriptions, lower bills, and manage your money better. Once you connect your bank account, Rocket Money identifies all of your subscriptions in a single list. From there, you can select the ones that you don't want anymore. And Rocket Money may be able to help you cancel with just a few taps.
Turn him off! Turn him off!
I can't have to pay for the premium account!
You can! I know you don't have any money!
Damn, you got me. Rocket Money can also help you see how your money's doing and budget your money better. Rocket Money saved me around $100 on last year's home internet bill. Take control of your finances today. Go to rocketmoney.com/wolfden and try it for yourself. Well, I think we all learned a valuable lesson today. Get your money under control with anything other than what I just used. Rocket Money. It's called Rocket Money. Yeah, that. Yeah, get that. There is a phenomenon that I see online with products like this. People like to look up video reviews of a product before they purchase the thing, but they also like to watch those reviews even after they purchased the thing. And if that video doesn't unanimously justify their purchase, oftentimes they get pretty mad and leave nasty comments. Please be aware of that, because all I'm really seeing online is people playing weird mental gymnastics trying to justify why this thing's better than an analog pocket. Why does it have to be better than the analog pocket? Can't they both have their own merits in their own right? You're just gonna have to do a lot of convincing to make me appreciate this beautiful 0.1K display over being able to play any game other than a Game Boy Color game. I got this straight from ModRetro. I purchased it myself from the ModRetro website. It came with a new version of Tetris in the cartridge slot already. It's a pretty cool version of Tetris, actually. Tetris with some modern conveniences like instant dropping and holding a Tetramino, which you couldn't do in the original Game Boy version. I like that they're publishing new Game Boy Color games, and the carts they're using are kind of gorgeous. I was expecting a cheap ROM cart, but they clearly put a lot of work into this. The console is made out of magnesium alloy metal. It is relatively heavy. You can supposedly run it over with your car. I'm not gonna do that, because believe it or not, I do like this thing. Feel like I have to keep reiterating that, because I am gonna be very critical. The only tell that it's metal is that it's heavy and that it's cold to the touch. This like thick coat of paint that's on it kind of makes it feel a little plasticky. But I actually like the way that it feels in the hands. The buttons are really nice. They're definitely membrane buttons, but they have a thick press to them. People are gonna really like this D-pad too. The ergonomics are good thanks to all the junk in the trunk. I love my analog pocket, but some people don't love the angular body. The ModRetro is definitely better for ergonomics, but that's just how an original Game Boy Color is. So, not really any innovations going on here. It also takes 3 AA batteries? What year is this? There will be a rechargeable battery pack in the future, but still no word on release, or even a picture of it anywhere. The speaker in here is great. Every single Game Boy Color that I've ever used has had a terrible speaker. This one is nice and loud. There's also an OSD that you can pull up with the side menu button. This controls brightness, which I have to lower all the way down so you can see it on camera. There's a frame blending setting, which you'll probably want to turn on for some games. If you see something flickering in your game, turn on frame blending. See, now the change is flickering. If you turn on frame blending, now they are transparent. This will emulate the poor response time of an original Game Boy Color display on these modern LCD displays. This is necessary for some Game Boy Color animations. Every other FPGA console before this also has a frame blending setting. You need this for modern LCD screens, and that's basically it for your OSD settings. There are some hidden options for some color palette settings. My editor, Benny, actually sent me this little infographic that shows you what buttons you need to hold down when you turn the system on to enable different color palettes. This is a cool feature, but none of these are really that exciting. There are original DMG color palettes, but they don't actually give you the original DMG look. It does a bit of a better job than just applying a gradient map, but something feels off. I think it's because it's not the DMG core, it's still the color core. I'm not sure. This is another thing that I yelled about on my chat the other day, and my YouTube chat tried to gaslight me. I did a lot of yelling on that stream. If you have an original gray Game Boy cartridge, and it has no color information attached to it, and you insert that into a Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Color will just try to give it some color. That's why Mega Man is red here. It's just random colors. The ModRetro Chromatic does not have a way to force the system to use the original DMG pea soup colors. The only way to do that is with this overlay, which, in my opinion, doesn't do a good job. Which is fine. This is a Game Boy Color clone, not a Game Boy DMG clone. It's doing its job of acting like a Game Boy Color. It's not the end of the world. The option would be nice, though. I'll note that the Analog Pocket has the exact opposite problem. There is no way to use an original gray Game Boy cartridge with the Game Boy Color core, using the Game Boy Color colors attached to it. You just get the original DMG colors. This is what I was yelling about. People kept spamming this option in the settings to force the Game Boy Color mode. This setting notoriously does absolutely nothing. You can use the Open FPGA core if you want, or install a custom shader, but the option's there. Why doesn't it work? And just make an option that actually works.
If you go to palettes, you can like kinda get close. The green palette is kinda close, but it's still not exactly it. Nope, that's still not it either.
I actually don't really think this is that big of a deal. I prefer the original DMG colors because a Game Boy Color usually did a pretty bad job of adding random colors. Like, why is Mega Man red? But we're splitting hairs here. We're just splitting hairs. I think the best thing about the ModRetro Chromatic is that the Game Boy Color palette, by default, is actually very good. It's very muted, but that's how it is on an original Game Boy Color. The colors aren't that colorful. This is how these Game Boy Color games are supposed to look. And honestly, this is what you should be excited about with this console. Right out of the box, it gets the look of the games right. And it's just a color palette. Keep that in mind. It's not some technological revolution, it's a color palette. When the Analog Pocket first came out, I remember saying, wow, these filters are amazing. And then within weeks, all of those color palettes and filters were ported over to RetroArch, and then everybody had them. So I'd imagine something similar will happen with the ModRetro Chromatic color filters too. Let's go a little deeper though. The reason these games look so good on the Chromatic specifically is a combination between the color palette and the low resolution screen that they chose. Because of that accurate pixel resolution, you get these great grid lines, which is something that modern LCD screens with higher pixel counts usually have to emulate with filters. The color palette on the Chromatic still isn't 100% accurate either. It would be pretty much impossible to be that accurate without using the exact same screen Nintendo used 3 decades ago. Having a backlight really affects the way colors are portrayed. I don't know about you, but I'd rather have a backlight than 100% accurate colors. That being said, they did a great job. Analog also did a great job, by the way. If you set the Analog Pocket to original Game Boy Color Plus mode, it adds these grid lines, and it also looks great. In fact, I think the blues are a little more accurate, honestly. The greens, maybe not so much. I honestly think that both these devices are great for Game Boy Color games. They both have their trade-offs. You gotta put them in a little T-chart and decide which one's for you. The other thing people were arguing with me about in the YouTube chat was sub-pixel rendering. And I'm realizing now it wasn't YouTube chat, it was one guy, just one guy that was pissing me off. The ModRetro Chromatic has an identical resolution to the original Game Boy Color, and it also has an identical sub-pixel orientation. The red, green, and blue sub-pixels are in the same order. This helps achieve the retro look we're looking for. Really, the bullet point on the box should say sub-pixel level accuracy. It is being argued that the Analog Pocket cannot look this good because the screen is 10 times the resolution, so the sub-pixels are 10 times smaller. And here's proof over on Reddit. You can see the sub-pixels peeking through on the ModRetro Chromatic screen. And they're a little too crisp on the analog. This sub-pixel situation really doesn't affect the way that games render things at all. Sub-pixel rendering just means the game might borrow an extra sub-pixel to the left or right of a pixel to achieve a certain look. You can see it most notably in text. You see a random red pixel here or there. The pixel is sort of borrowing its neighbor's red sub-pixel. Well, that's baked into the game. So these modern LCD screens emulate that anyway. It's not like you just lose that pixel, it's still there. You're not just gonna lose it. I'm sorry, I'm yelling at that one YouTube chatter again. The Analog Pocket might not have the same sub-pixel layout, but the fact that the resolution is 10 times that of an original Game Boy Color and the ModRetro Chromatic means that it could emulate that sub-pixel layout pretty easily. I can't do the math, but is the pixel actually 100 times denser? Because there's 100 pixels in there where there's normally 1. Technically, there's, I think, 82 pixels because 18 of them are being used for grid lines. We're splitting hairs! But anyway, just take a look at this for yourself. You might notice that these emulated subpixels are not saturated full red, blue, or green. Analog is applying a filter. This lets them still achieve the colors that they want. At the microscopic level, it looks worse. At the actual human eye level, it looks just fine. And the screen's bigger and there's more options and you can play Game Boy Advance games too, okay? This is also something that shaders have been doing in emulators for years. Modern LCD screens don't always have the same subpixel layout, and they usually have a really dense, high resolution. So these emulators just have great shaders that you can apply. Somebody even took the shaders that are on the Analog Pocket and ported them over to the RetroTink, modified it a little bit so the subpixels look exactly like they do on the original Game Boy Color, and that looks great. Sometimes software emulation ain't so bad, right? Especially when you're using modern hardware anyway. This ModRetro screen is a modern LCD screen with modern problems. You have a backlight in it, which changes the colors anyway. The white balance is all off. People were arguing about this too. The Game Boy Color's screen cannot do white at all. It has no light in it. The white is just the back of the display, which is a grayish, yellowish green. And it was like that in the fucking 90s. It's not like I'm sitting here smoking over all of my Game Boys to make them yellow. That's the way that it looked. I'm just regurgitating what I was arguing about on the live stream the other day. Analog gives Game Boy Color games this warming tone to the whites. ModRetro does not. Some people prefer the ModRetro white balance. I don't really think it matters that much. I'm just being petty because we're splitting hairs about pixel level accuracy. At least be consistent with your opinions. I also did some color tests and the lighting is so bad on all of them that it's really hard to tell. But they all just seem so vastly different. For a split second here, you can see that the Game Boy Color is kind of in the middle when it comes to white balance between the Chromatic and the Analog Pocket. But this could also change in the environment that you're in. It's kind of just a preference thing. This is one of the other problems with modern LCDs. It's not going to change with the environment that you're in because the light is coming from behind the screen. I think this is the best example of the color difference. And I think the ModRetro gets some colors very accurate, and I think the Analog Pocket gets some colors very accurate. I think, honestly, they're both pretty great. There is a feature of the ModRetro Chromatic that I think is really cool. You can just plug a USB-C cable into the bottom, plug the other end into a computer, and it can be used as a capture device. As a video capture device, if you couple it with a Game Boy camera, you can use it for your Zoom calls. It does take a little finagling. They recommend using OBS, but their instructions didn't quite work for me. You have to use this scaling filter, not the one that they suggested. But it works pretty awesome. I'm not sure how much you'd want to actually play games like this if you wanted to use it more like a dock. There'll be a little bit of latency, and there's no external controller options. But it's a cool feature, nonetheless.
There's actually not much input lag at all. I think you could probably viably play like this. Just not me.
I know I'm being overly critical of this thing, but that's kind of the point of this channel. Also, it's because of the weird brigading I've been seeing online surrounding this. You'd think that this screen is like the second coming of Christ. It's just a Game Boy clone console, which I know is a little reductive. It's like when I call Elden Ring a hack and slash game. What? That's what it is. But we've seen Game Boy clone consoles before. There's one that's $20 more that plays Game Boy Advance games too. People just stopped liking analog because of their availability issues and their misleading marketing. No emulation should be no software emulation, even though we can kind of argue that shaders are software emulation. Splitting hairs! We're still splitting hairs. Did you forget we were splitting hairs? I don't think there's any doubt that the Pocket is a better value here. You can also load up your own FPGA cores and play even more systems on there. It's got a lot going for it. There's also this FPGBC. This was one of my best handhelds of 2024. It's a kit you have to put together, but for around $90, it's an amazing modern Game Boy with a great screen too. Although the screen has an even worse subpixel situation. Also, the clock speed is bad. It runs a bit too fast, but I guess you get what you pay for. I will reiterate that I actually like the ModRetro Chromatic. I think it's an enthusiast console made by enthusiasts for enthusiasts who only want to play Game Boy Color games, which I think is a little bit silly Because why not be an enthusiast that wants to play Game Boy Color games and also Game Boy Advance games and also Game Boy DMG games the way that they looked on a Game Boy DMG? And also, why not Genesis, SNES, some arcade consoles via the FPGA, Open FPGA cores? I'm glad this ModRetro Chromatic exists. Someone in my chat said, it'll be crazy when they do a Game Boy Advance. That would be sick. A Game Boy Micro version of this would go so hard. I appreciate the attention to detail here. It's a passion project and it shows. I hope that they keep making stuff. Maybe lose the sapphire crystal and magnesium alloy so that we can drop the price down a little bit, huh? I just can't help but think that the people brigading for the ModRetro Chromatic must have something against analog. I can't imagine that these people are genuine retro enthusiasts who genuinely think that there's something revolutionary going on here. To me, it just seems like a color palette. These pixel peeping, color comparing conversations seem to be heavily biased. They seem to be heavily biased against analog, right? That's what they're biased against. It's analog, right? Is that a scratch? No, it's just dandruff. So what do you guys think about the ModRetro Chromatic? Do you think this is the second coming of Jesus Christ? Or is it just a clone console? Again, I think that there's a lot that they did right here, but I think that there's some really there's just a lot of trolls is all that it is. Leave it in the comments below, at me on Twitter, any and all this other social media garbage. If you are looking for a Game Boy clone console, there are so many options. It's such a great time to want to play Game Boy games right now. There are so many different ways you can go about it. And you know what? The more options, the better. I have been streaming here on YouTube and over on twitch.tv/Wulff every Sunday and some other various days. You can check that out and ask me questions and get me all worked up for no reason. Don't forget to check out WulffDenapparel.com where you can get a shirt like this. Oh, I dropped my phone. Oh, God. And if you like this video, subscribe to the channel. I swear to God. Goodbye.